Walking the dog can be a spiritual practice. I've used this as an example forever, but now it's actually one of mine. Have you ever listened to a live jazz band? Live blues band? Ever wonder how all the musicians know what to play so it sounds good? Do you ever wonder why? The piece has a melody. That melody is harmonized by chords, collections of notes that go along with the melody, support it, give it different flavor sounds. Example?
Sure. So.
And so if you know what chords are in your what notes are in your melody and what notes make up certain chords, you can mix and match to make certain sounds, flavors, emotions, right? There's a lot of different techniques people use for improvisation. One is you find the key of a piece and you play notes from that scale or key or mode. So if you've got a blues piece and a 1-4-5 chord of C, F, and G, you know that all the notes in the C major scale are going to work in there. There you go. If you've got a jazz piece and a 2-5-1, you might have a D seventh and a G minor seventh and a C major seventh, because they all have the notes in the C major scale, right? It's great to have a pianist again, right? I can do stuff like this. I love this. Thank you, Kevin. So as you pick the notes to play from a various scale or mode, call that playing through the changes. The chords change underneath, the melody's going, you play along with it. You play through the changes. It's about knowing enough about the music theory, the emotional sound that you get from different combinations of notes or chords to pick the right notes you want in the right rhythm at the right time to make the music. Good enough?
Yeah,
Okay.
Perfect.
So listening to and watching musicians do this, it always seems so smooth and grateful. Because one of the things they teach you is if you screw up, don't make a face. Because no one's going to notice but the other musician in the back row. And it requires practice and knowledge of all this music theory and where the notes are on your instrument. And a good ear. You know, it's true of all art that you need to know all the rules before you can break them, if you're going to break them to make art. So musicians, which you don't see, the practice, the study, the learning, the listening before what you're observing as a live piece, a lot goes into that. The musicians practice, they prepare. So it sounds smooth. It sounds rehearsed. In a sense it is. Even the improvisation's rehearsed a little bit in terms of practicing the things you need to know to do it well. And the more one studies, the more one practices, the better one knows one instrument, the more complex pieces one can play and improvise and not get lost. Stands to reason. The melody of our lives can get quite complex as well. And harmonizing with all the changes and ups and downs that are going on can get quite complicated. But I think all of us can learn to better roll with the changes. I really need REO Speedwagon right here. And the ups and downs, everything that's going on. The same way musicians learn how to play through the changes. We can learn to play through the changes. Life throws stuff at us we're not fully prepared for, but we can get better at rolling along with what's happening day to day. And if we do that when big disruptive changes come by, you know, the skills and techniques we've practiced in just dealing with the day-to-day ups and downs changes will serve us well then. Just as musicians have certain tools they learn to help them improvise scales and modes and syncopation and harmony and all that stuff, there are also tools we can use to help us roll with the ups and downs changes of life. So I want to share with you some of my own favorites. My favorite little tools and tricks for coping with that sudden change, that unexpected development, the obstacles that pop up that force us to move in a different direction, stop, recalibrate, those changes that can catch us and throw us off guard. Any one of these things I'm going to talk about can be a deep practice in itself. And anyone can use any of these tactics at any time. Different people always find different things helpful. Depends on who you are and what situation you're in. But here's a little bit of what's off in my toolkit. And I'll start off with little things and stress hacks that you can do in the moment, in a minute, and then offer some suggestions that might move you into how to better prepare a practice for preparing yourself for dealing with real momentous change as time goes on. My first hack, which probably a lot of you have heard of before, is breathe. It is amazing what a deep breath can do if you can remember to take one. It's incredibly powerful if you can remember to take 3. One deep breath, you'll calm down. You might go right back to what was bugging you. 2, you do 3, and you're going to be like, oh, what was I getting all upset for? At least that's how it works with me. If I can breathe 3 times, it will put me in a totally different place. Sometimes I forget to even breathe 3 times and get more distracted and grumpy and grouchy like everybody else does. If I remember to breathe 3 times, it never fails to work. You can go days without water. You can go weeks without food. You can't go more than probably 60 seconds at most if you're real good without breathing. Breathe. Some of you probably had to breathe when I told you to change seats earlier. We get used to things in order and the way we want them very easily. And sometimes it surprises us ourselves about what little change really bugs us, right? But breathe. Keep your eyes open or closed. Sit, stand. You don't have to be a Zen master. You don't have to have a daily meditation practice to take 3 deep breaths at any moment. Rarely will you not have time for 3 deep breaths. If you don't have time for the 3 deep breaths, you don't have time to think about anything anyway with whatever's going on that's that drastic. So just about any time you need it, the 3 breaths is there. And the 3 breaths help you do something that is also a good tool to have in your toolkit dealing with the ups and downs of changes. Helps you stay present in the moment. It helps you to not reflexively react to whatever's happened. It helps you let what's happening happen, and then you can better control your response. You can't control the waves. All you can control is your response to the waves. You can swim, you can drown, you can call for help, you could learn to surf. But you're only in control of your response. And the breath helps you to not instinctively just react. Take a moment. Stay in the moment. Don't be reactionary. Think before acting or speaking. Breathe. Right here, right now is all you actually can deal with at any moment. And most of us don't stay in that moment most of the time. We're thinking ahead to what's coming next. We're upset about what happened earlier. But when you're right here, right now, like Bob, you'll be able to pick out the winker. You know, if you're present and paying attention, right? One of my other favorites when I'm hit with stuff that's got me in the ups and downs is to just go outside. Sometimes just opening the window and sticking my head out. Breathing the air that's outside is different than breathing the air that's inside. The view is different. You've given yourself a pause button. Sometimes just going outside will rearrange everything, for me. And there's little I'm in the middle of most of the time that I can't take 30 seconds or 20 seconds or 90 seconds to go outside, take a breath. Along with that, touch the ground. Literally touch the ground. If your mobility allows you to, touch the ground. tap it with your foot, inside or outside. If that's tough on your mobility, something solid, touch that's touching the ground. Let yourself be planted for a moment. It helps you be right here, right now. Works for me that way anyway. When I remember to do it. That's why it's all about practice. Intentionally touching the ground, well, brings you back to earth. Quite literally, brings you back to earth. If I'm at home and something's got me off, not only going outside or touching the ground, I grab dirt in the garden. My hand's now dirty, it's connected to the ground, and all of a sudden I'm in a little different place from which I can deal with whatever's happening or whatever's got me upset. I have to wash afterwards, but it works. Another thing I do sometimes, and I offer this to folks I do with spiritual direction, is name some things around you. Chair, person, camera, screen, whatever's around you at the time. You don't even have to say them out loud. You can if you want to. But that, again, breaks whatever's going on in your mind and brings you here in the moment. Puts you right in place with whatever's around you at the moment. By the time I've named 5 or 10 things, I've usually given myself enough time to pause, maybe do one of the other things like take a breath or remember to go outside. Another is to move. Most preachers don't pause to stretch like that, but I did. It's okay. Move, stretch, rotate your neck, wiggle your feet or your hands, shake them out. They say, if you're at work and you sit all day, get up once an hour, right, and move around for 5 or 10 minutes. It works. It helps. It's very useful. Another tool is to give thanks for things. I have everybody give thanks every Sunday, right? It's not just good for you spiritually, it's literally good for your brain physiologically because we're pre-programmed to catch the negative. So we can use our brain's ability with neuroplasticity to change itself about, to name things we're grateful for, find the positive. Helps us be more likely to do that and more able in the moment when we need to find something to be grateful for, give us some perspective. The more we practice gratitude, the better we are rewiring the brain to step away from noticing the negative first, getting an accurate picture of what's before us, and maybe being able to see the positive a little more easily. Another tactic I have to remind myself often, and in my job and in any job where you deal with other people a lot for a living, it's very useful. Do not take anything personally. Frequently when someone, and I know this from my job, frequently when someone's irate at the minister, it's not me they're mad about. It's me they're being mad at, but it's usually not me they're mad about. And that's probably true for most of us most of the time in dealings with others. If somebody's real angry at you, yeah, it might be about you, but don't take it personally, first of all. That person's in a different place. We don't know why exactly. Give it a space. Don't take it personally. The more you can remove yourself from that, the easier it might be to hear what somebody else is saying, and then be able to come at it with a more accurate view of what's in the moment. Maybe you did do something wrong you need to apologize for. And if you're not taking it personally, maybe you can do that a little more easily. And if you didn't do anything wrong, not taking it personally will help you not get into that spin cycle of, what's wrong with that person? What did I do? Probably nothing. They're probably mad about something else or bothered about something else. I stop and think of it from my own perspective. Most of the time that I appear grouchy or angry to some other people, it's not them I'm irritated about. It's something else that's happened, something I thought of. It's about me more or less than anybody else. This is another one I find very useful and very important. The universe is impersonal, but it is not malicious. There is no God or goddess or deity out to get you. The universe itself is not rigged like a simulation to give you a hard time. Whatever's happened, whatever's going on, it's not because of you or anything you did or that you are not good or unworthy, whatever. You are not being punished. Stuff happens, sometimes randomly, but it's not malicious and it's not just to you, just about you, for some unknown metaphysical reason. Lump that together with don't take it personally. I have to use this one the most when dropping things or like stubbing my toe. I still get upset at those two things like I'm 5 years old. I don't know why. And I have to remember that every time that happens. You know, don't cry over spilled milk. That's one of my worst ones. You know, I spill something like, it just spilled something. It's like, you would think by now I would have this down, right? But that's one of the ones that gets me all the time. I hate spilling stuff. I'm clumsy, and I don't like that about myself. And I tend to be messy, and I don't like that about myself. So something spills or something goes out, I'm like, I lose it. I can't do it. I'm like, okay, wait. I just spilled coffee. Everything's fine. And I never cease to amaze myself at my inability to do that in the moment with that thing. Bizarre, right? I bet you've got one, though, that works the same way for you. And I need to remember this one more often because it always works for me. Something that really helps you to play through the changes is literally playing through the changes. You got a lot of change going on, you gotta find time to play. You gotta find time to find some joy. Fake it if you have to. Do something just for fun. It helps. While we were playing Winker, I'm gonna guess that you weren't quite as involved in ruminating on whatever's got you right now, whatever's going on in your life that's acting like the universe is malicious and personal. I bet for a few minutes it was less bad while we were playing Winker. Maybe not for all of us. I'm going to guess for most of us, for that 5 to 10 minutes, whatever it was. We were in a different place. We were playing instead. All right? Music. Studies have been done on this. Listening to music can break you out of a pattern or break you out of a reactivity. It's always done that for me. When I was real young, I was like 12 when I started to play the guitar, I got this book, you know, one of the books you get people trying to learn an instrument. And one of the things that it said that I didn't believe at the time, but later would find out is true, that headaches go away when I play my guitar. Do you ever have this? Like you have a headache and you play and all of a sudden the headache's not there. You might stop playing and it's back, but right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it does. I have no idea why this does, but it does. Right? Cold symptoms. I have a horrible cold. I have the flu. If I pick up the guitar, I won't feel the symptoms if I sit there and play. As soon as I stop, you know, the actual symptoms will usually come back, but it's bizarre how this works. And when I read this as like a early teenager, I was like, oh, that can't be real. But I found it to be true, which I think is really wild. I also found the tip of like if you use a light colored guitar pick on a dark floor or a dark guitar pick on a light floor, they're easier to find if you drop them, which has also come in very useful over the years. I usually have a light pick and a dark pick in my guitar case to match whatever floor I'm on. I've done that since I was 14 because of this thing in this book. You never know what's going to turn out to be helpful. Another real important tool to have in your toolkit when you're dealing with change is asking for help. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness or inferiority or that you're bad or not good or not competent. Asking for help is a sign that you're an adult and it comes from a place of strength. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. Ask for help when you need it. Now, you may need to ask for help from somebody professionally. Come talk to me. You have a therapist, right? But often, asking a friend or a neighbor or anyone in the moment to help you if you need help will work. It's amazing how much that is there for you. And I think a lot of us, a lot of times, don't ask for all the help we could really use. Don't want to be a burden, don't want to be a bother. That's what we're here for, to bother each other when we need help. That's why we work better in groups, because some of us will be having an off time and we can't do much for everybody else and we need help. Then there'll be other times in our life where we'll be fine, we'll be rolling along. Somebody else in the group will be having a rough time, we got to help them. That's how it's supposed to work. That's why we're better together in groups. We're all in this together. Along with talking to somebody, listening is also really important. Listen to yourself. Quiet down to listen to yourself. Listen to somebody else. Helping somebody else never fails to put things in perspective for me. And I find this bizarre thing happens to me, and I've been doing this about 20 years now in ministry. Whatever I seem to have going on in my own life, my own stuff, it never fails that the universe sends somebody to me to get help as a minister who's dealing with something similar. And it makes me want to go, are you kidding me? Really? Because that's what it feels like. It feels like the universe has it planned. I know that's not true, but it happens so often. I'm at a loss to explain that. I get people, in a sense, through my door as the minister all the time that are dealing somehow, some way with something that's going on with me. And boy, does it help me reorder my own brain to take a little perspective on what's going on with me. It's very useful. Do a perspective check. Is it really that bad? Is it that awful? We all tend to get into this loop sometimes. Everything's awful, everything's horrible, everything's wrong. Hold back, get some perspective. One of them I use for myself is 100 years from now, all new people. 100 years from now, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say none of us are in this room. 100 years from now, all new people. That works for me very well. I like that one. That's a personal favorite. I also love what in Buddhism they call the 5 remembrances. These are really powerful. Different schools of Buddhism will use different words or phrases to describe them, but all the ideas, they're all the same, the 5 big ideas. In some Buddhist monasteries, or even some Buddhist communities, when they sit together, they'll say this first thing in the morning or at the start of a session of group meditation. I am of the nature to grow old. There is no way to escape growing old. I am of the nature to have ill health. There's no way to escape having ill health. I am of the nature to die. There's no way to escape death. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. There is no way to escape the changes and being separated from them at some point. My actions are my only real true belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. My actions must be the ground upon which I stand. Now, you might think the Buddhists are a little odd to go that morbid first thing in the morning as a daily practice, but think about it. I used to think that this was nuts at first. I'm like, why would you want to be that down every morning? But then it occurred to me, it has the opposite effect. It's like, okay, I've gotten my anxiety about death and aging and sickness out of the way today. How bad is it going to be? And even when I'm ill, I'm like, well, yeah, here I am, can't escape that. So, let's do what I can to get better. It helps me not get stuck in those places. When I first ran into this at a Zen group I was sitting with, I hated it. I'm like, it's so negative. I love these now. If that's the extreme thing we're dealing with, and maybe you are dealing with life and death, a really bad illness. I've done it myself now. And I think one of the things I did the first 3-4 weeks after I got diagnosed with prostate cancer is I said those every morning. I'm like, well, maybe it, but that's it. All right, let's go today. I needed stuff to get me through the day. And if you've ever dealt with cancer in that way, you probably had things that helped work for you in that way too. All of these things are related to mindfulness and coping with stress and change. They're all like life preservers we can use to keep afloat in the moment of an unexpected change and the unexpected ups and downs. Having one or more of these things in your tool belt will help in the short term. But in the long term, it's not the life preserver we need on the ocean. We need to learn how to surf the waves. And that's where having a dedicated spiritual practice is really helpful. You can't stop the waves. They will keep coming. You will keep having changes upon changes. It's like it's the only constant is change. The surfboard is a spiritual practice. I think about spiritual practice as something you do with dedication. It's a self-regulated discipline that enriches your inner life, centers you, returns you to your heart and your deepest values, helps you find clarity, deal with stress, and gain equilibrium. Boy, it'd be cool to have something like that in your life, wouldn't it? It's a discipline that deepens your relationship to God or Goddess or the universe, yourself and others in the world around you. Now, most people think of the usual things when I say this term, spiritual practice. You think of praying or meditating or variations of those, like yoga, reading sacred texts, doing Tai Chi, walk a labyrinth, Zen meditation, journaling, right? These are kind of things that kind of come up. But the reality is just about anything can be a spiritual practice depending on how you engage it. I find that anything that is a spiritual practice has these commonalities. They are intentional, deep, regular, reflective, and consecrated. Intentionality is required. Something is done as a spiritual practice, as a spiritual discipline. There is a mindfulness and an awareness to it. You engage the discipline for the purpose of your inner life. Spiritual practice is not a scratch the surface activity. There's a depth to the practice in the discipline. Engaging the practice deepens the quality of your other experiences and of your relationships. Like any discipline, a spiritual discipline needs to be done regularly. One-off activities may help in the moment, but they're not a spiritual practice. Practice is ongoing. You might walk a labyrinth at a weekend retreat, but that's not a spiritual practice. That's walking the labyrinth at the retreat. I know people who will go walk a labyrinth every day if they live near one. That's a spiritual practice. In order for a spiritual practice to transform your life, it takes time and therefore many repetitions. It needs to have a constant calendar of its own time and place. A spiritual practice is a discipline not skipped for light or transient reasons. It is something no one forces you to do but you. And some days, like any practice, it may be very difficult to hold yourself to it. Or circumstances, if they're real drastic, may prevent you from a day now and then. But otherwise, it is very regular daily practice. You can also have a weekly practice, a monthly practice, a yearly practice. As a spiritual director, I ask people to develop a weekly, monthly, and yearly spiritual practice. Some usually have one, and the others are harder to find for themselves. But you can find them. Some days it's going to be hard to practice. Other days it will be easier. But spiritual practices only lend you their greatest benefit over time. Because in the moment of crisis, you can't turn to a practice to steady you if you don't have the practice. They have to be developed and practiced ongoing, ongoing, ongoing. Spiritual practice allows you time for reflection, introspection, contemplation, feeling things deeply, thinking about things deeply. A discipline that connects you to something other than yourself. Now, this may be your tradition, maybe God, maybe the universe, maybe your deepest values or your faithful commitments. But there's a sense about a spiritual practice that what you're doing is important and holy and connected to something even beyond you. Some things you may not see as spiritual practices until you look at them from the different angles. Dancing is a spiritual practice. Painting, rowing, sculpting, reading, friendship, parenting, singing, playing an instrument, hiking, preparing and drinking your coffee in the morning. I think I love coffee, not so much for the coffee itself, but for the little ritual of making the coffee in the morning. Because that's when I like to drink it. I don't drink it other times a day, ever. This is the latest I'll ever have a cup of coffee, like church coffee hour, right? But it's that practice, right? It's about how you do things that makes it the spiritual practice. As Thich Nhat Hanh has famously said, you do the dishes to do the dishes. Right there, present, in the moment. Walking the dog can be a spiritual practice. I've used this as an example forever, but now it's actually one of mine, which I think is very funny, and the universe being very humorous again. I don't work when I walk the dog. I don't listen to the news or music. I don't worry about what's on the shopping list. I've learned to walk the dog, paying attention to the dog. I don't walk the dog, I walk with the dog. The dog is very good at getting me to notice the grass and the sky and the trees and the wind and the weather, because the dog is going to want to walk even if it's so cold my face hurts to be outside. But there's a wild practice to that, of having to do that every day and paying attention to what's going on. You know you've got a deep, ongoing spiritual practice when missing it physically feels bad, like withdrawal. Walking pancake, I ponder, I contemplate. I feel more of that oneness you're supposed to feel with things they talk about, right? You know, at one with the universe. It's great. I mean, the changing colors of the leaves, the sky. Nowhere do I pay more attention to that now than walking with the dog. It's great. It's been wonderful. I think that without walking the dog every day, I think the pandemic quarantine would have drove me over the edge to screaming and crying. But it didn't. I had that grounding, everyday, regular practice that drew me out of myself and put me in the moment there. When I walk my dog, walk with Pancake, I see a lot of other people walking their dogs. And I know who does it as a practice and who does it as a chore. The guy I see virtually every day, he's got like a beagle. And he's always on the phone. He's always working. He's got a headset. He never says a thing to the dog. He's walking the dog, but that's not a spiritual practice. He walks his dog his way. I walk my dog my way. But I'm pretty sure mine's a spiritual practice. And if I had a wager, I'd bet his is not. But I see other people who I know they're walking with the dog as their spiritual practice. They may even consider it that way. I can tell by the way they interact with the dog, the way they interact with other people, the way they interact with the grass and the woods and the river around us, wherever we're at. You can see it in their eyes. Delighted to be out in the world, just for a moment, with their dog, with the beauty of all that is. That's the kind of practice we need to develop. There's one for you. You may already have one and don't think of it that way. But spiritual practices are probably our biggest tool for dealing with change, and not just up and down change that's disruptive and real heavy. And I think we're going to do more of that next week in that area, right? We got this lined up. So when you get to that point where it gets real difficult and the melody's complex and people are throwing in flat 7, 9th, 13th chords, you know what to play through the change. But you only get to that point when you practice when it's not so hard, when you just got, your 1-4-5 blues progression that you can use all your licks over and they're going to sound mostly good anyway. Playing through the changes. Practice so you can play, and don't forget to play through the changes, because playing is important too. Thanks a lot for watching this video. It would help me out a great deal if you liked the video to give it a big thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share this video with others, maybe ring that notification bell so you can be informed when we put out other videos like this. Check out my website and blog at tonylorenzen.com for even more resources that will open your mind, touch your heart, and inspire your spirit.